Hello, and welcome to Oops, I Talked Politics, the left-wing political podcast where we talk about politics and sometimes pop culture. I'm Ryan.
I'm Sly.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Darryl.
And the news has been so crazy that we're not even going to dip into current events, and we're going to talk about a broader topic this time. Because it's been a crazy couple days.
Guys, do you think I'm going to get immunity granted to me next? I feel like anyone can get it.
Seemingly anyone, because everybody has dirt. But that's besides the point. So we are going to talk about Space Station Silicon Valley, right, guys? My favorite
cool
N64 game.
I didn't know who that is.
It's not my favorite, but it's good. So we want to talk about Silicon Valley because I find it very interesting because I feel like a lot of people think it's like filled with like liberal elites, and then a lot of people also don't think that at all.
There's a lot of people that hate it.
The thing is, like, people look at California in general. Like, it's funny because people look at it and they're like, "Look at this liberal bastion utopia," and Silicon Valley is like representative of that. But if you know much about California, like most of the people fighting the wildfires right now are $2 a day. That sounds out. $2 an hour. Inmates with no workers' comp. Fighting the fires instead of actual firefighters, and that experience won't translate to actual firefighter work at all. So it's basically slave labor. You realize that California is not the liberal utopia people on the right especially proclaim it as. And when you dig into Silicon Valley, it's the same story because they're still capitalists at the end of the day.
Sly, are you telling me if you took over and became your communist utopia, you wouldn't use Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan as slave labor to fight forest fires?
That is besides the point, though.
It's allowed for them because they are the scum of the earth.
Yeah, those are called gulags in communist circles. That's what we encourage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Political enemies are the real vermin.
Yeah, they should be used as slave labor.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like it's a lot of instances like that. Like California's not allowed to increase taxes without a 2/3 vote or something like that. There's all these rules. Creating like this libertarian society in California. And Silicon Valley, a lot of the people there are also have the libertarian streak, especially the idea of the Randian Superman, which people ascribe to Elon Musk, and he's now proving it was erroneously ascribed to Elon Musk.
So
who is he?
I want to talk about Elon Musk, who I describe as if Trump and the Galaxy Brain meme had a baby.
I don't think that's fair. I think that's really harsh.
I don't care. Because here's the thing that I want to say about Elon Musk. I think he's like a Donald Trump type figure, but for intellectuals. And the reason why I say that is because he has a lot of similar kind of styles and talking points. I'm not saying he believes the same things.
He also has a cult of personality. He has a cult of personality around him too.
He has a cult of personality, but there are more parallels in that too. And I just want to start with Elon. So Elon Musk is a big Silicon Valley guy. He's the CEO and owner of SpaceX and Tesla. So SpaceX wants to go to space, they're like the private company that's pushing to go to Mars, and Tesla is pushing solar panels and electric cars. And he became super rich and famous when he was one of the co-founders of PayPal, which when eBay bought PayPal, they bought it for like $10 billion. So that's like when he rose up the ranks. And the reason why I say he's a lot like Trump is because he has that cult of personality, like Sly said. And he says a lot of things that he kind of is just like, this is what we should do, without kind of thinking, is it necessarily possible? And yeah, he has more grounding in the stuff he says because he is an inventor and a scientist. But I'm going to get to some of his claims in a little bit, but I want to talk about his political beliefs first because he is the most centrist meme figure that I've seen in recent pop culture. He describes himself as half Democrat, half Republican, somewhere in the middle, socially liberal, but fiscally conservative. But I feel like he doesn't really back that up properly because he advocates for a universal basic income, which is cool, but then he's like, I'm a socialist, but not the kind that shifts resources from most productive to least productive. So he's a socialist that doesn't believe in wealth distribution.
It's also worth noting that UBI in general is becoming an idea on the libertarian wing for whatever reason. I guess as a compromise with allowing people to grow exponentially gigantic and hogging up the resources.
Yeah, I guess. And he supports a tax rate of 40%, but wants that on consumption taxes, not income taxes. But he does support the estate tax, so like his views seem all over the place to me.
Or maybe they're very half Democrat, half Republican.
40% consumption tax?
Yeah, which is like...
He also said that he's a socialist and Karl Marx is a capitalist.
Sure, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, by the way, like Trump, he also tweets random dumb shit, and people are like, what the fuck are you talking about?
So...
Yeah. Which he's tweeting on Ambien, apparently.
Yeah, well, I'm going to actually get to that.
Everyone on Ambien lately.
Yeah, Roseanne, Elon Musk, the big two. So he said before Donald Trump was elected, he criticized him by saying, I feel a bit stronger that he's probably not the right guy. Okay,
harsh
hot
words,
take.
harsh condemnment.
He also he stuck with him until the climate change accord.
Yeah. So after the election, he said Rex Tillerson was a good pick for Secretary of State, which,
cool.
Okay, I guess. And then, yeah, he was part of a panel that was advising the president where he said, like, the more voices of reason he hears, the better, which is, I think a fair point. Whether or not I agree with it is irrelevant. But then he resigned from that in June 2017 after we withdrew from the Paris agreements.
Wasn't Tim Cook on that panel, too?
I believe
A lot of
so.
stuff.
A lot of people were. And it's funny, even after the climate change accord thing, they were like, we're leaving except for tax cuts. We're going to stay here to resolve those issues. But aside from that, we're leaving.
Yeah.
It came out that he does a lot of lobbying, gives a lot of money to both Democrats and Republicans, and when pushed on it, but when pushed on it, he says, in order to have your voice be heard in Washington, you have to make contribution, which is a very Trump thing to say, because during the debates, he was like, I bought politicians, that's why I know how to end it. And the more people
He's doing that, isn't he?
Yeah. And the more people looked into it, they were like, well, you did contribute to George W. Bush's re-election campaign, but then you also contributed to Obama's, but now you give a bunch of money to Marco Rubio, and and they're like, but so you're gonna resign over the Paris agreements, but you give money to Marco Rubio and also the National Republican Congressional Committee, which is like they heavily funded like Michelle Bachmann, who's like the most anti-science person I can think of.
Mm-hmm. Like Trump too, like we mentioned that Musk goes from issue to issue and he changes from left to right. Trump did the same thing, especially before the election, and he was campaigning.
This really does sound like the profile of someone that is half Republican, half Democrat, where you keep flip-flopping all over the place because you have no like core belief on how the world operates.
Yeah, and also Trump also donated both Republicans and Democrats. Like he bragged about how he bought off the Clintons and stuff like that. So same kind of shit going on here.
Now, one of the things that I had the hardest time with, like, because I really liked Elon Musk a few years ago, because I was like, this is so cool. He's actually investing in like cheaper green energy and all these things, and I thought like naively that like, oh, he's gonna like overhaul every industry and we're all gonna be safe from climate change.
Everyone thought he was gonna be the savior of humanity, and people still probably will say that.
And one of the things that I'm really torn, because he's very against nationalization of goods and he's like very in favor of privatization, because like, he feels like he can do a better job than like the government's doing. Yeah, but one thing that's really interesting is he does keep, like, pushing these ideas that he makes sound like they're these groundbreaking ideas when they're not at all. Like, he was talking about public transit that would go from set places to places and pick up people that only have to go certain places. And people are like, those are buses. Those are buses. Or he's like, what if we put efficient trains underground so that they don't take up, like, land that we can use for goods? It's like, yeah, that's a subway that exists.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that it's talking about the Hyperloop, right? Which is like not a train. It's like pressure tubes or something.
Yeah, but like a lot of times the way he pitches it, it's like he acts like he's like inventing this whole concept.
And also he's suggesting infrastructure, like building infrastructure for all his ideas, while like most of the stuff he suggests, like electric cars is a good example. Like instead of investing in electric cars, you can invest in more subways and buses, and that'll actually reduce congestion.
But I mean, I would say you could do both.
Yes, but the reason why electric cars have become so popular is because they're the capitalist alternative to having buses and trains.
Well, buses and trains only work in major cities, though. Like,
yeah.
Well, that's because no one's building infrastructure. Like we don't have a single bullet train or any of that kind of stuff like they have in other countries. Like we have they've always advanced technologies in railroads and stuff like that, and we don't have any of that. And you're saying
I will definitely agree that bullet trains should be in the U.S., but the U.S., compared to these countries you're talking about, which is like Japan and most of Western Europe, these are very urban countries.
But we have zero in this country.
I know, but what I'm saying is 85% of people don't live in a major city. Like,
yes, but we have zero. This entire country, all liberal urban areas have zero of these.
Which he agrees with you there.
Yeah, I agree. We should have those, but that's not the solution to make America.
Yeah, that like we should have some, but like to say that should be our whole focus.
I know, but the thing is, the reason why the electric cars are being pushed is to entirely replace the idea of any urban enhancement whatsoever. The fact, and that's indicted by.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Then why the fuck? If you look at actual electric cars, if you look at it the way it is, there's no way for an electric car to gauge the difference between plastic bag or some kind of obstruction in the road versus civilian. So right now, one of the reasons why Uber is having controversy is.
Are you talking about self-driving cars?
Yeah, self-driving cars. The reason why the self-driving cars are I guess what I'm getting to, because with Tesla, they're going hand in hand. The idea that self-driving cars and electric cars should be packaged together. With self-driving cars, I guess I should segue to that. With self-driving cars, which are being packaged with electric cars, they can't detect obstructions in the road, discern them from regular people. So the idea is either these cars will have to stop every 5 seconds, basically, or they'll have to ignore certain obstructions. So Uber got in trouble because they ran over a person. And now there's always, and there's really no way around that. There's really no camera or radar to get around that problem. So there's a reason why they're investing all this money to solve what might be an unsolvable problem when they could just invest in fucking public transportation.
But the thing is, I think what Phil's point is as New Yorkers, I completely agree that like our public transportation needs to be completely overhauled, and it is absolutely disgusting the way that it's set up. And like I totally agree that there is a real good argument to make about like self-driving cars and electric cars are like the bourgeois answer that leaves the working class with shitty trains to fall apart. But as a whole nation, that's
as a whole nation, we have to, first of all, as a whole nation, we have to reform our transportation system, because we have urban sprawl, which any city planner will tell you is just complete waste. We have all this land, and all it is road. There's no public transportation anywhere. There's food deserts. There's all this stuff. Basically, from a city planning, so much of the country is wasted, and there's no effort whatsoever to fix this problem. Basically, since the 80s, this issue has been like talked about, and no one has ever done any more, because since the 80s there's been less and less emphasis on public transportation and reforming it, and all there is talk about electric cars and all the other stuff, because they're trying to avoid the conversation, because admitting you need to improve these infrastructures, admitting that you need more public investment, and there'll be more tax, I mean all this stuff, and Silicon Valley guys are explicitly against that kind of stuff.
I think that's a fair,
and that's fair, but again, like the urban sprawl thing probably you're talking about affects a lot of people, but when you compare it to other countries like Greece, for example, Athens has a third of Greece's population in that city, literally of the whole country, or Tokyo has like 10% of the whole country's population. A city like New York City, which is twice as big as the second biggest city.
The fact is, even you're saying like all these cities, but recent, but that. The cities themselves have these issues. Like, if we had great cities and no issues else, I would agree with you. Like, we have to have. I can't expect the moon, but I think it's very clear that the question isn't. Can it possible to do the whole country? The question is, should we do it at all? And I think the answer for a lot of people is no. We shouldn't do it at all. We should invest in these capitalist solutions instead.
Yeah, but we're not arguing that New York shouldn't do these things.
Yeah,
but
I'm not saying you are. I'm saying that Silicon Valley guys believes that.
Okay, that's fair. And that, to go back to Elon Musk, one of the reasons why I think he's an interesting figure when we talk about these kind of public transportation things is he's very clear that he feels that the private sector is what should handle all of these issues, and not the public sector. And interest of privatizing like everything is, I read a whole personality like a whole, what's the word I'm looking for? They like interviewed him and like they got into like his psyche a little bit, and the analysis was that so much of his decisions are like based around this idea that like if you're rich and successful, you shouldn't have to like, you should be able to like do whatever you want and not have to like mingle with poorer people. And I don't know if I necessarily agree that he feels that way, but like this idea that like the private sector, you should, if you have enough money, you should be able to travel however you want, use whatever technology you want, and that like
I should point out that when asked why we should use his solution to send buses, he did basically say, "Well, there's poor people on buses." He didn't exactly use the word.
Yeah, but that's
there's
like
all there's all these people there. It's all you have to do the buses and the train schedule. It's so fucking gross.
Yeah. And the reason why I think he's important to talk about now is because when we talk about him as this like, you know, inventor who's going to reinvigorate like, you know, the green market, like when we talk about electric cars and stuff, some of the stuff that both on Twitter, like you were saying earlier, or in his business practices, I think are important to note, don't exactly line up with what we view as this like humanitarian figure. So one of the things that I want to talk about is the working conditions, not necessarily the working conditions, but how he structures like his pay and how he treats his employees, where there was a couple insiders went on the record with the New York Post, and they said that working for Elon Musk is a shit show, is the exact quote. And they basically said he talks about being a socialist and doing good for mankind unless you work for them. And what he said was he basically, every time he sets these like goalposts or figures to get people to work for him, he keeps moving them to kind of screw his employees over and over again, where one of the workers had a $150,000 a year job, and he took a cut where he said, I'll work for Tesla and get a base salary of $34,000 a year because Elon promised him these commissions based on these sales and all these projected sales models. And another person was supposed to get $42,000 worth of commission based on our contract, but they said, oh, we had to change the goal and we're only going to give you $4,000 worth of commission. And that's a huge difference, 42 to 4. And one of the reasons why is they keep moving his goalposts, where he was like, we're going to have 5,000 Model 3s out by the end of June for sale. And that's like the most popular model that people are looking to buy because it's like the relatively affordable one. It's in like the 40,000s, which relative to other Teslas is very cheap. But out of those 5,000, 4,300 of them had problems that they had to be reworked and reprogrammed and re-put together. So that means they only had a 14% success rate. So if you're trying to make commission sales and you only get 14% of your product, that is, you can't live on that. And to compare that to other car companies, usually car companies have about an 80% success rate on their car models. So like 14, not super good.
Yeah.
And to bolster morale, to show how much he like cares and how he's working with them, even though he's like a super rich guy, he sent everyone in his company pictures of him sleeping on a couch at the office and say, see, I'm working just as hard as you guys. Look at this couch. I can't even get a bed for myself here. And one of the biggest parallels that I saw to Trump was he has boardroom meetings where he just berates everybody and then asks them all to praise him. So like one of them, he most recently had a big scandal because he just tweeted that he's thinking of making Tesla go private, and he has funding secured at $420 a stock. And he did say that he had it secured for 418 or 419, but he thought 420 was funnier, so he said 420. But within a couple days of him tweeting that, the SEC is completely investigating him because they think he just made that up so that his stock would go up, because it did go up 11% that day, because it was at it was about 320-ish, and then he was like, oh, someone's gonna buy the whole company for 420 a share, so everybody bought it up. And they're investigating that if he lied about that, then he could,
that's
that
crime.
could be a huge. That's a crime. Yeah.
And this is not the only time Elon Musk has done that. He uses his tweets, and if you look at the Tesla stock, there'll be a buyout right before he tweets, and then he'll tweet, and there'll be a massive jump. So a lot of people have suspected that he's been manipulating the stock with his tweets for a while.
When his investors and his shareholders had meetings with him and they asked him questions about like this funding and stuff, he just said they were a bunch of boneheads and was like, I don't need to answer to you, even though that's like kind of what shareholders like jobs
and it's
are.
very Trump himself, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And they also say that apparently he just takes Ambien all the time, like you guys said, and like they're like really not sure if he like is gonna hold it together for much longer. And this New York Times interview I read with him, he was just like, yeah, like I spent the whole day, my whole birthday in my office, and I don't even have any friends anymore. And it really seems like
he said
he's,
this has been his worst year.
Not doing
Losing his
super
mind.
great. It sounds yeah.
Yes, I should point out another reason why he's like Trump is he's kind of a chronic fuck up. PayPal, like people point out PayPal, look at the success story of PayPal. For PayPal, what happened was it was actually got out of business. So what happened was when he went on vacation, Elon Musk, his board of directors actually fired him and replaced him with Peter Thiel, and that's when PayPal started turning a profit. So like his board was like, this guy's a fucking up our company, you have to get rid of him. SpaceX is mostly 80% of its funding is to the government, so it's just privatization of public money. Tesla's probably gonna go bad business soon, and because it's trying to produce one model car at a rate of at the rate of a normal car company, and it can't even do that. But despite that, its share is 322 a share on the stock market, while actual car companies have like $10 a share on the stock market. Car companies that make multiple models very efficiently at an 80% success rate, their stock is so low, while Tesla's is so inflated.
Whereas like he promised the Model 3 car, I think it's been like 2 or 3 years since he's had delivered. Yeah,
so he's a very good example of how the stock market artificially keeps these companies pumping, and like so Tesla by any objective metric, like people when the cars have come out, people have looked at it and professional car companies have looked at it and said, I have not seen a car this poorly made since like 90s Kias.
They were saying like the pieces like just don't fit right, like for those 86% of cars.
Yeah, some important parts are made out of plastic and they break immediately. And of course, when objective people are looking at these and saying these are bad cars, the Elon Musk crowd comes in and say you're just trying to go after him, fuck you, and just like Trump, like these brainwashed masses come and defend him, saying fake news, media, bad media.
Well, I have a question for you guys, partially defending Elon Musk here. If we're comparing these super business, like billionaire businessmen who just do whatever they want with their companies, is it not better that instead of having someone who's just like, I'm going to make the next entertainment thing, to have someone who, even maybe though he fucks up, trying to make future tech that is potentially for the betterment of humanity, whether or not it works, rather than someone who's just like, I'm going to make the next iPad.
I think the work that he does, like if he can actually deliver on any of the stuff that he says.
Well, SpaceX, Sly brings up a good point that it's largely government funded, but it also is it has been innovating in the space field for the past 5 or 6 years now in ways that other space companies and NASA have not.
Yeah, what I'm saying that I think that the work he does is important and good, but his personality and his personal views get so in the way that I think like giving him all the credit and being like he's the one who could save us is a worrying and problematic way to look at it.
Yeah.
Where like I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at the advancements he's made in space technology and electric cars, because like I've watched a lot of his like reveals and press conferences and stuff, and if his cars can do half of what he says they can, they will. They really
can't.
will.
They
but
can't.
I'm not saying now, but I'm saying if like this is the way science
they'll
works.
probably go out of business before any of his.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that like the solar panels that he has designs for it disappear from the entire public
and
memory.
And I really do want to stress the SpaceX thing, because that has probably been his biggest success, I think.
Yeah, and in the free market, it would have crashed and died, and that's a testament to how public funding to fund risky ventures like space exploration, which. One of the reasons why SpaceX is doing well is because, it's able to offset its massive losses from failed launches and stuff like that with government money. But Elon Musk takes that money and then turns around and argues why we should be using libertarian solutions for these problems.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of the research he's done has been good research that we should continue to build off of. I'm just saying that, like, we should, just because somebody is good at science doesn't mean that there's someone that we should listen to for, like, he might be good at space, doesn't mean we should let him build rich-only subways.
That's what I was going to say earlier. Like, he has his PhD in, like, astrophysics or something, and, like, when these, like, new rockets are revealed, or, like, the drone barges that are catching the reusable rockets, like, he comes up with a lot of that stuff, but like that is probably where he should stay and not being like, here's my views on
like
politics.
If you're a neurosurgeon, you should probably not be the head of urban planning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why like I think my thesis on him is that when someone like this, I would say like a brilliant inventor that's also an idiot, when they are reined in by government funding and government-based research, they can make a lot of huge advancements. That doesn't necessarily mean that we should let them take over every single part of everything.
My hot take is that a lot of these, if you look at most Silicon Valley companies, they'll talk about we have to save the world, we have to disrupt these industries. Most of the time, it means labor taking huge pay cuts, crushing unions, and creating these cults of personalities. Like at Tesla, if you go to apply for a job at Tesla, they'll demand you have to be loyal to Elon Musk in order to be eligible.
But that's what I'm saying.
You can't be just a good physicist who's looking for a job, and this whole mentality of Silicon Valley is make people's lives work worse and increase overall happiness of its workers just for the sake of this nebulous promise that it's for the greater good of mankind, humanity. In reality, these companies will do more if they just treated their employees fairly and gave them a reasonable wage. And we're slightly small. It's like most companies. If they're slightly smaller, but treated other companies with fair living wage and make sure they're taking care of like four more companies in the past, make sure they can actually afford the products they're selling and stuff like that, then it will do more to help humanity than these nebulous promises of we're going to save humanity. And I will admit, Elon Musk has the biggest thing he's done is change the conversation on a lot of these things, increase interest in these technologies like solar panels. Supposedly his batteries are still good, even if the rest of the Teslas cars are shit. But still, for all the hype he's given, it's like maybe like 20% he deserves.
But that's still like what science is always like a collaborative effort, like of society coming together to do these things, and that's why I think someone like him.
And no, but I really disagree with the idea that because if people imagine, well, the problem is I don't believe we're going to be in space anytime soon, and if we are, it's going to be a massive.
People underestimate how many scientific advancements come from NASA that don't have to do with space.
Most of it's going. I think most of it's going to go to the very rich. I think you're going to solve more problems by alleviating poverty, and you're going to do that more by taking care of your employees.
I wonder if like if his 500 workers in his company are paid better, is that more important than having a solar panel technology for the rest of the world?
Well, you act like he's the only one that can be solar panel. Most of his hype is just building up hype for this. Like he does that on his free time with tweeting. Like he doesn't have to crush his employees. Like his actual like I said, the percentage of the technology he pushes, like the batteries and the solar panels are good. Most of the rest of it, like it's most of his hype. Like
yeah, but you're still getting advancements.
So you think we should just crush employees and never just hope that the rich will get better?
Why do you have to jump to the extreme? That's
not
what
because
we're saying
I fucking hate this shit. That idea that people should be crushed now.
That's not what we're saying.
Yeah, but it is what you're supporting by not being against this mentality, because that's what they support.
No, we are against this mentality, but
you're not, because if you're saying this is all for the greater good, that's what they want. They want you to be like, it's for the greater good, so we should allow it. When reality is, most of their efforts is to just crush and ignore.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all.
I know that's not what you're saying, but I'm saying you're tacitly supporting it by not going against it.
What I'm saying
that's what they're saying.
What I'm saying is...
I know, I'm saying that's what they're saying, and you're tacitly supporting it by not going hard enough on it.
No, that's...
You're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm saying that's what they're saying.
Okay, and I think that's wrong. But I think that someone like Elon Musk shows that just because someone is really popular, when the government backs them and regulates their industry, that doesn't mean that they should be given free reign in the private sector. That's all I'm saying. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
So, Phil, what about other Silicon Valley figures, aside from someone as controversial and divisive as Elon Musk?
Yeah, we were mentioning how the crushing the workers and how we think that's a good thing. But actually, I don't think it's a good thing, because one of the things I wanted to talk about was that Silicon Valley is notoriously anti-union, because many of these big Silicon Valley titans are very libertarian. And for a long time, they've been able to get away with this because in the engineering profession, they know that's the people you have to treat well. So like Google and all these other companies, they treat their engineers well, they pay them well, they give them perks, they take them out to dinner.
Well, they're doing that for now because there's not enough engineering degrees. But that's also why they push, a lot of Silicon Valley types push for more engineering degrees so they can crush their pay too eventually.
Yeah, and that's like Sly said, it's just because they have to now, because those people can just go and find another job at another big tech company.
Yeah, like one thing to point out is the last data point I have about Tesla is in just the past couple months, according to LinkedIn, like LinkedIn data, 46 like higher in the food chain people went from Tesla to Apple. So like you are seeing that like demand of like when they're not treated poorly, they do leave and can get jobs elsewhere in Silicon Valley.
And that's why it's been very hard to convince when unions have tried to convince engineers to join. They've had a really hard time because these people are like, if the company doesn't treat me right, I will leave, and it's not hard to find another job that pays me well. So in the engineering sector, they've been doing fine there, but in a lot of their other sectors, they have been really against the idea of unions. In 2016, Bjorn Westergaard was an engineer in this company called Lanetix, I don't know what it is, Lanetix maybe. Basically, they tried to start a union and all of them got fired from it. And he's saying like they said it's because of their cutting costs or whatever, but really this whole industry is very anti-union. So we often focus on the domestic side of it, but what I also wanted to talk about was the foreign effect, the global effect rather, of Silicon Valley tech, because we probably all, when we think of iPhones, or at least for me, when I think of iPhones, I think of Foxconn factories in China where the workers are trying to kill themselves because you have to live there and you have curfew and you're not allowed to have visitors, and
just like Elon Musk, right? Locked in his office.
Yeah, right.
He's definitely equal.
And before you even get to China, though, basically every single computer chip in the whole world has two rare elements in it, rare earth minerals, cobalt, and the other one is something else with a C that is not. One sec, coltan.
Zoltan.
Yeah, Zoltan. Coltan and cobalt are both rare minerals that are mostly mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo area. And so, if you know anything about the Democratic Republic of Congo, they've been having civil war since like 1998 or something like that. So the people actually who are mining these minerals are largely children, like 8 to 13 years old, that are being forced to do it by like militias and local government forces, who then force kids and other mistreated workers to go into mines to work without equipment, to die in accidents, and beat them if they're not getting enough of it. And then they take that cobalt and coltan and they sell it to Chinese companies, who then ship it over to China and have basically Chinese slaves. Maybe I don't want to compare like who's worse slave. Probably a little less.
It's
worse.
exploitative labor. Like you're gonna all exploited on some level.
Yeah,
and that's how China gets their cheap products.
So maybe they're a little bit better treated, but you wouldn't go to bat for their
not at all.
Humanitarian respect. Yeah.
And so then these teenagers in Congo are mining these minerals that then get sent over to teenagers in China to make the parts that then get sent over to America for Apple to sell for $900 a tablet, and then to make American workers work at their Apple stores for like $11 an hour selling the stuff, where Apple makes record profits every goddamn year.
They were just the first company to hit $1 trillion, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so. They have more. They have more money than the Treasury.
That's something.
They have twice. I think they have twice as much as the Treasury, actually. And they pay lower tax rates than most American families. Their workers are making $11 an hour. Again, not the engineers, but the surrounding apparatus that sells these overpriced products are making so little money that they would qualify for food stamps and Medicaid.
And by the way, the engineers are the most bougiest workers. Like the people doing actual labor are the ones being exploited the most.
Yeah, it's hard to it's one of those things. It's hard to say I don't like to say like actual work, because if you're the one
work, but like there's a difference between bougie work and hard labor.
But if you're the one making the product, like the people doing the hard labor are not going to have a job. Job creators.
Exactly. But like I said, maybe it's better than starvation or being exploited for the rest of your life until you die. Pick your poison.
Yeah. So my point, I guess, is we can come in and say, well, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. But when I'm buying a T-shirt, I actually can get it locally made. You can get local materials and someone to make it here for a decent wage, and you'll pay more than an $8 Walmart T-shirt. But there actually is much more ethical consumption in many other industries. With Silicon Valley,
like we've talked about that with food too. Like you can actually buy local food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know everyone likes to say, if I go to Whole Foods, it's like $9 for a cucumber. But that's bullshit. I mean, honestly, you'd pay a little bit more, but it's not like you'd pay 50% more going to get locally sourced products.
But like, how does that solution make yourself feel better, or does it actually do anything solve the problem of this exploitative market?
it makes you less part of the problem.
Yeah.
So just to, I guess, wrap it up, is most of these companies in Silicon Valley are making record profits in the past 10, 15 years. It's a booming industry right now, even if it's not sustainable. And the CEOs of these companies are billionaires. But if you look at their supply chain, many of them don't even try to track it because they know if they fucking track it, it goes to child labor in Congo. Like Microsoft was asked, hey, where does your cobalt come from? And they're like, it's too hard to figure out where, so we just get it.
Yeah, you were saying that there's no alternative to trying to, whereas you can buy like food locally or get your clothes made locally. It's like, how do you get computer parts for a tech company locally?
Exactly. So it's not like we as consumers have a much more ethical option. If you want to buy a smartphone, there's cobalt in there, and that's probably coming from Congo.
Yep.
Like, you're not really getting electronics in a way that is ethically or even remotely ethically sourced. And so we can argue like how much can these companies do about it? Could they force the Congolese government to enforce labor laws there? Because it's not like cobalt is a very common mineral, but they could actually say, we're not buying your shit unless you tighten up your regulations, unless China starts tightening the regulations on their workers, or something like that. We're not going to buy your resources. But they obviously are not going to do that because you can sell a piece of glass with a computer chip in it for $900. So
yeah, and you'd also have all the competitors would be like, well, we're still going to do it, and then now,
you're out of business.
Yeah. The only way to do that is if you actually had the public choose that. Yeah. And like at a massive level, and I don't see that happening.
Yeah. So that is what I have to say about Silicon Valley.
I had to bite my tongue to not say more about individual solutions to these problems. But transitioning to my topic, so Phil says we need to create jobs and stuff like that, but one of the arguments of communists like myself is how much of this money is made up in bullshit and just to make themselves rich, and how much of it is needed for functioning. And the stock market is like a big example of that, because it's all made up money, it's all bullshit. And a big example of that is a company called Theranos. So apparently, the three of you don't know anything about Theranos, but some of your listeners might, depending on how caught up they are in the Silicon Valley news. It was a big story back in the day, and it's still kind of ongoing. But so Theranos was chief executive was a woman named Elizabeth Holmes, and the company's valuation became $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes' net worth was $4.5 billion in 2015. So and she was considered the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. So people were like, wow, progressiveness. Look at Silicon Valley, so progressive. First self-made female billionaire. And so every Silicon Valley bullshit story has like, I'm trying to save the world, I'm trying to change the world. And they always start with like a simple childhood vision. Steve Jobs said he hated buttons, so that's why we have touch screens now, because Steve Jobs hated buttons.
I'm gonna change the world because I fucking hate buttons.
And Elizabeth Holmes said she hated needles, so I'm going to get rid of needles.
Oh, I do know about this.
So she accepted. So she became. She started studying chemical engineering, but she dropped out in her second year to start a company called Real Time Cures. The company eventually became Theranos. The original concept was a wearable device that will monitor a patient, administer medicine, and adjust the dosage as needed. So it would be like a bracelet that would monitor your health and give you medicine.
Which seems fairly creative.
Except it's fucking impossible. Like that's the thing about Silicon Valley. A lot of it is just literally bullshit. And this was so bullshit that even she was like, "Oh, it's bullshit." Like,
yeah, this is a fascinating story.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about, because it's such an indictment of the stock market of Silicon Valley, of excess wealth. So much, it's just when you have so much wealth and you have no incentive to give to your workers, that this is what becomes of that process. So she instead created a new concept, a device called Edison, that will take a pinprick's worth of blood, extract it from the finger, instead of through more
intravenous means.
Yeah, intravenous means. And using this simple pinprick, it will test for hundreds of diseases. So analysts drop the blood for literally hundreds of different assays, like cancer and high cholesterol, at a fraction of the prevailing cost. And it will be collected in nanotainers and allegedly tested in a diagnostic mini lab besides a microwave oven, which is what the Edison was. That was the oven that will be tested in. Not the oven, the lab it will be tested in. And she called it the iPod of healthcare. And she really dug into the Steve Jobs thing. Like, she wore turtleneck sweaters all the time in all black. And she even, this is accusation, but if you hear her talk, people accuse her of giving herself a very masculine voice. Like, when she talks, she sounds like a teenage girl trying to pretend to be her dad on the phone when, like, the principal calls. Like, oh, I'm Elizabeth Holmes. That's an accusation.
Or it's like when I have to talk to grown-ups, like the voice I use.
Yeah, and that is actually a problem in business circles. Women do often have to do that. They have to pretend to have a more masculine voice and presentation in order to be more appealing to investors. Because that's what, the strong leading man, that's what people want. So she was like...
Yeah, there's a study that women that spoke with a vocal fry were taken less seriously in business meetings.
Yeah, so that's another thing to know. For liberal, progressive Silicon Valley is still mostly white men, and they hire mostly white men still, so...
Yeah, certainly.
It turns out, though, that this actual method was bullshit. The tiny blood sample had diluted extensively, leading to artifacts and spiritual results. But it didn't matter because she still got a lot of investment. Part of it was probably because her father, Christian Holmes IV, worked for the U.S. Agency for Internal Development, and their mother worked as a foreign policy and defense in Capitol Hill. So because of this, she had a board of high-level political figures, such as former Secretaries of State George Shultz and Henry Kissinger, Marine Corps General and now Secretary of Defense James Mad Dog Mattis.
I can't believe people of such high moral caliber like Kissinger and Mattis would fall for this scheme.
Yeah. Also, Rupert Murdoch, too.
The list goes on.
It was partnered with Safeway and Walgreens. And they were talking about, in 2012, they were talking with the Department of Defense for using technology on a battlefield in Afghanistan. So this was not like a joke. This was a legit thing that was happening. In 2015, Holmes was recognized by Barack Obama as an U.S. ambassador for global entrepreneurship. Vice President was there and sang her praises at the launch, the supposed launch of the Mini Lab, which we later turned out to be false. The Mini Lab was not real at the time. The article I'm reading, it talks about how venture capitalists don't really know what they're doing with any certainty. It's impossible, after all, to truly predict the next big thing. So they bet every little bit on a company they can with the hope that one of them hits big. So entrepreneurs will often work on a lot of meaningless stuff, like adding apps to existing products. They claim to innovate. So basically, the investors are trying to invest in everything to make sure they have a piece of any big puzzle. Because the stock market usually grows so big that having even a tiny slice of Google or Apple, when it grows big, is worth investing in. So they're going to get money just by this inertia. And the entrepreneurs are able to capitalize this by just adding apps to a product, saying, if you go on Indiegogo or GoFundMe, you'll see this all the fucking time. There are literal apps for drinking water. They have like pictures, and they say it will track your water usage, this fucking water pitcher. And these Indiegogos are successful because people, if you put an app on anything, people will think it's the next big thing because people are desperate to have the next big thing. Yeah. And they to appeal to investors, they claim that the innovation will change the world, which appeals to the venture capitalists because the venture capitalists are trying to pretend they're not just there to make money, even though they actually are. But they're trying to pretend this is some kind of humanitarian effort, and this is compassionate capitalism.
Especially when it's something like this kind of thing. If this was a real thing, it would change so many people's lives. Because like I come from a family with a history of like diabetes, and even in just the past few years, the advancements for like the amount of blood you have to take and like where you have to take blood from and stuff to test that stuff is huge. And like if you could show that for other diseases, and especially with like healthcare is getting more and more and more expensive and more people are getting shut out of the market every year, I could see why if somebody gave me this pitch and they had like fake studies that I bought into, I could see wanting this thing to be real, like so bad.
I thought it was a good idea.
I feel like it's one of those things that if someone's like, we can test for 100 cancers with a pinprick, like you're the only person to ever figure that out.
But she claimed like she had a solution. She had the device. It was getting it to work, and she has this board of investors: Henry Kissinger, Rupert Murdoch, Safeway, Walgreens, all the people behind me. They all think it's real. We're gonna have these products in Walgreens. If it seems legitimate, all you have to do in a lot of these industries is fake legitimacy until you actually seem legitimate enough.
Yeah, because that's the thing is like we all are scientific thinkers and like know that that's unreasonable and ridiculous, but like. And I'm not saying that, like, poor Kissinger, he had the wool pulled over his eyes. But like I remember, I just didn't remember her name or the company, but I heard like pitches from her like last year, like after this like scandal broke, and I remember like the way she was breaking it down. If I didn't have a skeptical eye on data and science to begin with, I could easily see falling for this.
Yes. And part of the problem is the tech press. That's one of the reasons why Elon Musk is now probably freaking out now. It's because tech press is always willing to play access to give comfortable press in order for access. And that's what they do with Elon Musk for the longest time. And that's why Elon Musk is now probably freaking out, because now that real car manufacturers are weighing in on his shitty cars, he's getting bad press for the first time, and he's not used to that, so he doesn't know how to react to that.
And that's why he goes to Twitter and says, like, we need special media that I could just make, I could censor whenever I want.
Yes, and so that's what happened with Theranos. Tech press was so eager to get access to Elizabeth Holmes, they all basically were singing her praises. Silicon Valley is so naturally secretive that like Steve Jobs was very secretive with his technology and his processes. So even being super secret isn't like a warning sign in Silicon Valley. Holmes took investors' money on condition she wouldn't have to reveal how Terra's technology worked. Plus, she will have final say on everything to do with the company. She even took 3 former Theranos employees to court, claiming they had misused Theranos trade secrets. So whenever people did try to talk about how the process works, she would try to sue them. So anyone who visited the company had to sign non-disclosure agreements and had security guards following them even when they went to the bathroom. And other scientists were barred from writing peer-reviewed papers on the technology.
Yeah, I get trying to keep like your technology secret to a certain extent, but like not letting scientists write peer-reviewed articles is to me very red flaggy.
Yeah, and so on top of that, this is the cult mindset that's very prevalent in Silicon Valley companies. She had her assistants track when employees arrived and left every day to encourage people to work longer hours. She's having dinner catered around 8 p.m. every each night, so she expects people to stay until 8 p.m. at least working. A lot of Silicon Valley is like this. The expectations employees basically work overtime every night, all the time. That's why Google they show all these cool like Google has like the playpen and all this cool fun stuff. It's because the expectation is you work there all the time, and when your brain is frazzled from working 12-hour work days, you go and play in the playpen to try to
instead of going home. Yeah.
Yes, and being with your family and living a life. Yeah. She largely forbade her companies from communicating with each other about what they're working on, so employees weren't able to talk about what they're working on with each other. Balwani, the CEO, was her boyfriend and the bully, tracking employees' whereabouts. And Balwani and her brother had no experience in any of the fields where they were in, but they got high positions because they're related to her. Or brother was related to her, and Balwani was a boyfriend. Yeah, like I mentioned, it turns out this technology is actually impossible. When the finger's pricked, the probe breaks up cells like debris, among other things, to escape into the fluid. And so, while it is feasible to test for pathogens this way, a pinprick is too unreliable for obtaining more nuanced readings. Furthermore, there isn't that much reliable data that you can read from a small sample of blood. And when people were pointing this out, Holmes was like, people always say that. It's kind of like Silicon Valley speak, where they say people always say it's impossible until somebody does it. I will change the future. And that's what she went on the news saying. Except it literally wasn't possible. Evidenced by this was her chief scientist, Ian Gibbons. He knew the results were off and desperately worked to solve them. He was subpoenaed when the court cases were turned out, were suing people for revealing certain secrets. And Gibbons didn't want to testify because he didn't want to lie on behalf of Theranos and to ruin this guy's life. But he didn't want to destroy the company by testifying against Theranos either. So he ended up committing suicide in May 16, 2013. And this was her chief scientist. He had no way to resolve this issue, and he ended up killing himself. And there's such a shitty company. They didn't even send a message to condolence with the widow. All it did was send an immediate letter saying, demanding her to send over all of his property immediately over to them.
That's like some movie villain shit.
Yeah. Ryan smelled bullshit, but the only one in the media that smelled bullshit and was willing to call on it was a man called John Carreyrou. He was a health reporter for Wall Street Journal that thought this all smells like bullshit. He says it's typical for Silicon Valley tech sites to have this much shady behavior and to have this little oversight and this little peer review. But a medical company needs that. Like it's one thing to fuck around with computers, but you're messing with people's health here. So he started investigating further. And since he was a real reporter, he didn't care about access, so he was willing to write an article about it. And Darryl was so desperate to stop it from leaking They met with him with a 5-hour meeting by David Boies, who's a Theranos member, and he was Al Gore's lawyer during the 2000 recount. And he went after Bill Gates in the 1990s for monopoly. He was a head lawyer for that. So another really important person tied to Theranos was trying to convince this guy not to go through the story. He went for 5 hours, and this guy said, no, I'm going to publish it anyway. And that's when her house of cards starting tumbling down. So it turned out she lied to the FDA, U.S. government agencies that regulate blood testing labs, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. She used, whenever people come to see how it worked, she will use traditional labs to fake the results because the actual machines couldn't produce real results. And she was charged by the SEC, the U.S. Security and Exchange Commission for massive fraud, had to pay $500,000 fine and return 18.9 million shares of Darryl stock. Also was banned from being director and officer of a public traded company for 10 years. And federal grand jury has indicted her and Bilwani for wire fraud schemes. Regulators closed down Theranos' labs in 2016. Nearly 1 million lab tests have been run nearly 1 million lab tests have been run in California and Arizona. A significant portion of these were erroneous or had to be voided. An untold number of people were harmed by the erroneous results. Some underwent necessary procedures, received misdiagnosis of severe conditions, and experienced emotional turmoil. So, and keep in mind, like this was all this money. She got $4.5 billion in net worth. The company was worth $9 billion, and it was all bullshit. And the stock market, everyone rewarded her until one person called it down, and it all came overnight. It just stopped being true. All the money evaporated overnight.
So one person truly can change the world.
Yeah.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, that man was Elon Musk.
But yeah, I think this is a story that shows Silicon Valley is the hype around Silicon Valley and the kind of damage it can lead to.
There's a part of me though that I was like, wow, someone did a bad thing and got caught and punished for it? What a world we live in. Like, that actually, it worked once.
Yeah. But like I said, this is not an atypical, like there's a lot of Silicon Valley companies doing this stuff that haven't been caught yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So what other kind of shady stuff does Silicon Valley do, Darryl?
I don't know about shady stuff. I'm more into...
But what funny stuff, wacky...
Not funny or wacky. I'm more into how people, like, deal with Silicon Valley and what it's like being there. Speaking of one, like, shady thing, it's hard... Because sometimes you have to get into, like, malicious intent for it to be really shady. Sometimes it's just stupid. Like, at Rainbow Grocery, people are drinking unfiltered, untreated, and unsterilized spring water. It costs $37 to buy a bottle of and $15 to refill. It's just...
This is in Silicon Valley?
In natural water.
Is there a spring over there?
California.
I think they export it. They don't.
Yep, it's described as having a vaguely mild sweetness and nice smooth mouthfeel. But the thing is, like, sometimes these companies, it's not just unique to these places. Like, Live Water in Oregon does this. They make unfiltered water. Tourmaline Spring in Maine, Zero Mass Water in Arizona, Liquid Eden in San Diego. And you can buy a water collection panel from Zero Mass Water in Arizona that costs $4,500 to collect water from the air. But it'll produce 10 liters of water a day. Yeah.
I was like, you can just get a bucket, but if it's from the air, you'll need like a cold glass for that.
I believe the creator of Live Water was also like he has a history of like trying to sell bullshit and stuff like this, like non-products that appeal to hippies.
There's a lot of different people and companies doing this. Like, this is a trend that's developing in Silicon Valley, is that people are drinking more real water. And according to one entrepreneur, it should expire after a few months. He says, if it sits around, it'll turn green. People don't realize that because their water's dead, so they never see it turn green. And he calls tap water toilet water with birth control drugs in them.
I mean, is he wrong? Where's the lie, you know?
And besides just like buying unfiltered water with a lot of bacteria in it, prices are so exorbitant, like that medium rent for 1-bedroom apartment in San Francisco is $3,400. So Jesus, you might think like, this is crazy. Why not just get a job in Oregon and like rent there, since it's like $1,000 is the median rent in Oregon. But don't worry, some people do both, because there's Silicon Valley workers that rent houses in Oregon, and they make a 10-hour commute or a 70-minute flight to and from work.
Oh my God.
And if that sounds crazy,
10-hour commute?
Yeah, if that sounds crazy, there's also people in Port of Oakland that have been converting shipping containers into living spaces.
Oh yeah. By the way, I should point out the guy who's one of the live water guys. His name is Mukandi Singh, but it's a white guy who was born Christopher Sanborn, but he took a Sikh name so he can sound more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What's his name? Muck in the sink?
This is so people have been living in shipping containers because it's actually much quicker and cheaper than a traditional house, and it's a lucrative business model for like a lot
Where
of
do they
like
keep the containers?
land.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. What land?
They've had to move it around. That I know the guy recently moved it to a warehouse.
God,
The shipping containers have interior plywood walls, and they're about 160 square feet. And they go anywhere from $8,000 to $50,000. There's a really interesting breakdown in the article of like what would cost what, and it compared the size you get compared to a regular apartment, which is pretty good. And if that doesn't appeal to you, just buy an RV because it's cheaper to live in an RV and go to work in your car.
that's some late stage capitalism bullshit if I've ever heard of it.
Yep. This is my favorite part is that reporters are being told that mushrooms will make them better at their jobs and ecstasy will make them nicer. And a high-tech executive told a New York Times reporter to try DMT because it is the thing to reach the next level of innovation and you don't throw up that much. A tech worker described this as intellectualizing of drug use as a stimulant for the brain. The technique is called microdosing. It's that you take a moment of inspiration and adapt it to capitalism. So people have been...
I have heard of that.
Yeah.
People take very small amounts of hallucinogens instead of like they take a lot that you just trip balls on them, and you just take a little bit throughout the day to like open up your mind.
I think people do have cocaine in the 80s.
Yep. And so hallucinogenics have been more popular in Silicon Valley over that.
Cool.
By the way, raw water, according to Men's Health, it's literally tap water from Oregon.
Of course.
And it's charged at $64 for 4 jugs.
The last silly thing that I read that's like it's not that big of a deal I still thought was funny is people are buying $1.2 million condos from Millennium Tower because it's $150,000 below the median cost in San Francisco.
Oh my
or wherever.
God.
San Francisco, from what I read, from what I've heard in the past few years, is the most expensive place in the country to live, right?
Yes.
I think not just the country. I think it might be in the world.
A lot of the big California cities are massive. The property values. I think if you bought like a house in the 1990s in Los Angeles, you'll have like $1 million just by doing nothing. By owning that
Just
property.
from equity. Yeah.
So, but the reason this Millennium Tower condos are below the median cost is because the building is sinking and tilting at 2 inches per year.
Oh, that's a minor detail.
I mean, it's not too much, 10 years,
Yeah,
20
well,
inches.
so far they said it's stable, so people are allowed to.
And that's a very common thing with these bloated real estate markets. Part of them bloated because of foreign investors from China using American real estate to hide their offshore money. Because in order to avoid taxes, they buy property here and as an investment, and that's a way to hide their money here. So like you, even like a cheap like 1-bedroom apartment house in Los Angeles with like shitty quality roof, shitty everything will cost you like $100,000, something like that.
Mm-hmm. So that
That's
seems
crazy.
pretty silly and unsustainable.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the entire culture surrounding Silicon Valley is just really stupid.
I think there's a huge proportion of the Silicon Valley workers that came and lived there too. I forget. It's like
Yeah,
at
I'm
least
sure.
40.
Yeah.
That's why people are commuting 10 hours to get there.
So what do? They like
Must be for the week.
they stay there for the whole week, I guess, right?
Or again, you go by plane. It's just 70 minutes.
But even then, like that would be if they're not getting paid that much. That's like you can't afford.
I know of someone who would like her house with her husband was in a different state in like Massachusetts, and she would just stay for the week, have like an apartment in the area, and then on the weekends go up to a different state.
That's part of the reason why I mentioned in our previous episode that gas prices help cause the 2008 crash because a lot of people were doing it in 2008 too because they're really far away from their job.
That's crazy.
Yep, not worth it. I mean,
It probably is.
Yeah,
It's still-
depending on how much. Yeah, that's the thing. That's why it's so expensive there. Because if the jobs are so lucrative, people are like, I guess I'll take a plane every day.
Average engineer salary is $124,000
Yeah.
in San Francisco.
That's true. That's fair.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of us think that's sustainable. to have people living 10-hour commutes away.
Well, it's funny because the person they interviewed for that said that they had lived in the Bay Area for I think like 12 or 20 years, and they're like, this is much preferable because of just how awful it is living in the Bay Area. Whereas like Oregon's a really nice place. Like sure, it's a long drive, but it's like it's so much more like refreshing and healthy.
So they just don't want to live there.
Yeah.
So, dear listener, you decide. Silicon Valley, liberal bastion of progressive values, or not that at all? You decide. So, thank you for listening. If you want more, you should check out the rest of the Flying Machine Network. I want to mention the Facebook group and the network channel itself. So you should join the Flying Machine Explorers Guild. We have all sorts of fun music conversations and movie conversations and lots of fun pop culture stuff. And it's just, it's a fun place to just hang out.
Yeah, if you just want something to like look forward to every day on Facebook that's not terrible news. It's like,
yeah.
Instead it's like, would you rather be able to teleport or fly?
Yeah, and if you do want to look forward to terrible news every day, join our Facebook group,
Yep.
Oops, I Talk Divisive Issues, or our Discord, and make sure you support the Patreon to get all our bonus episodes. So that's patreon.com/flyingmachine. So yeah, do all that. So, thank you all for listening to Oops, I Talk Politics. I've been tacitly supporting the most evils of society.
I've been accusing Ryan of being tacitly supporting the evil society all the time.
I've been foolishly trying to change my individual actions to help the world.
And I just invested in this awesome thing where it can tell me everything that's wrong with me. It's called Twitter.
It's called being friends with Sly.
Oh, it's called
Oops, I ended the podcast.